We are heading toward a reality where a home can become essentially worthless for one simple reason. There is no water left to sustain life there. This isn't some exaggerated plot from a post-apocalyptic film. The warning signs come straight from hard scientific research produced by federal agencies such as the United States Geological Survey and the Bureau of Reclamation, and together they paint an alarming future for large parts of the American housing market. Through this investigation, I identified 10 specific areas where water reserves are disappearing so quickly that specialists believe widespread relocation is unavoidable. Right now, millions of Americans are purchasing homes in these high-risk regions, completely unaware that they may be locking themselves into a financial disaster with no escape. In the sections ahead, I'll walk you through the concrete evidence, showing you the cities where underground aquifers are failing, rivers are shrinking, and authorities have already begun freezing new development. Be sure to stay with me until we reach the number one location, because it's a major metropolitan area that real estate professionals continue to market aggressively, even as its water situation approaches a breaking point. If you already own property in any of these places, you need to understand what's coming before the rest of the market finally catches on. Number 10. Orlando, Florida. When most people picture Orlando, they imagine endless greenery, swampy landscapes, massive theme parks, and afternoon thunderstorms that seem to roll in like clockwork. With all that water imagery, the idea that this city could face a serious water shortage sounds almost absurd. But once I dug into the actual data, the story flipped completely, shattering the polished, lush image sold to visitors. According to findings from the Central Florida Water Initiative, the region is currently pulling roughly 800 million gallons of water every single day from the Florida aquifer. On the surface, that number might sound manageable until you compare it to what experts say is safe. Their own scientists admit the sustainable threshold is closer to 760 million gallons per day. In other words, Orlando is already overdrawing its account, draining future reserves at a pace far faster than expected, and the bill is coming due. The fallout from this aggressive pumping isn't theoretical anymore. It's already happening, and it's far more alarming than most homebuyers realize. Multiple reports show that excessive extraction is reducing underground water pressure, creating an opening for salt water from the Atlantic Ocean to creep into the freshwater aquifer. Once salt contamination takes hold, the local water supply is essentially compromised. This isn't something you can fix with a basic filter. Reversing it requires extremely expensive and complex technology. Adding fuel to the fire, Orlando's population isn't slowing down. Data from the Orlando Economic Partnership shows the region is welcoming about 1,000 new residents every week. More people inevitably means more showers, more irrigation, and more strain on a system that's already buckling under pressure. Experts now warn that by 2025, water demand will exceed available supply by a wide margin. If you're considering buying a vacation home here, it may be worth asking yourself a hard question. What happens to property values when the tap starts delivering salty water instead of something drinkable? Before we move on to the next city, if you value this level of deep research, take a moment to gently tap the like button. It helps support this investigation. Number 9. Atlanta, Georgia. From there, I shifted my focus north to Atlanta, a city that has been walking a tightrope when it comes to water security for years. Unlike many large metropolitan areas that sit atop massive underground aquifers or alongside enormous rivers, Atlanta drew the short straw geographically. Built along a ridgeline, the city depends almost entirely on surface water, mainly the Chattahoochee River and Lake Lanier, to keep the taps flowing. Here's where things get uncomfortable. Lake Lanier, despite how often it's mentioned, is actually one of the smallest primary water reservoirs supporting a metro area of Atlanta's size anywhere in the country. When I went back through historical records, one moment jumped out immediately. During the brutal drought of 2007, Atlanta came within about 90 days of running completely out of water. That near miss sparked panic at the time and should have triggered sweeping change, yet development pushed forward as if nothing had happened. That crisis wasn't an anomaly, it was a clear warning. Data from the United States Army Corps of Engineers shows that Lake Lanier's storage capacity is slowly declining due to sediment buildup, even as the metro population has exploded past 6 million residents. At the same time, Atlanta is tangled in ongoing legal battles known as the Tri-State Water Wars. Florida and Alabama have repeatedly sued Georgia, accusing Atlanta of monopolizing shared water resources and damaging ecosystems downstream. If the Supreme Court ever delivers a hard ruling against Georgia, Atlanta could see a significant portion of its water access disappear almost overnight. To make matters worse, projections from the Atlanta Regional Commission estimate that water demand in the region could climb by as much as 50% by 2050. Picture investing in a home in a city that's perpetually one drought or one unfavorable court decision away from dry faucets. If you live in or around Atlanta, I'm curious. Have you already noticed your water bills creeping higher? Let me know what you're seeing in the comments. Number 8. San Antonio, Texas. Next up is San Antonio, a city that celebrates its deep history but may be heading toward an uncomfortably dry future. As I dug into the data, everything kept pointing back to the Edwards Aquifer Authority. San Antonio stands out for one risky reason. It's one of the largest cities on the planet that depends almost entirely on a single underground aquifer for its water supply. The Edwards Aquifer is impressive from a geological standpoint, but it's also extremely fragile. Its water levels are tightly tied to rainfall. When storms roll in, it can recharge quickly, but when rain disappears, those levels plunge at an alarming speed. According to the United States Drought Monitor, this part of Texas has endured years of severe drought conditions, placing relentless pressure on a resource the city cannot easily replace. As I reviewed public records, one troubling pattern kept showing up. San Antonio has been operating under some form of water restriction almost nonstop. In response, the local water system attempted to reduce its dependence on the Edwards Aquifer by constructing a massive pipeline that pulls water from another aquifer more than 140 miles away. That project came with a staggering price tag, costing ratepayers billions of dollars. Even so, critics argue it's little more than a temporary bandage on a much deeper structural problem. The long-term math only makes the situation more unsettling. Projections from the Texas Water Development Board estimate that the state's population will grow by over 70% in the next half-century, while available water supplies are expected to shrink by nearly 18%. You don't need advanced math skills to see how badly those numbers clash. As infrastructure costs explode in a desperate attempt to keep water flowing, water prices are soaring, and eventually, that pressure will ripple straight into housing affordability. If you're putting money into Texas real estate, tracking water conditions should be just as important as watching mortgage rates or inflation reports. And if you want to stay ahead of these shifting risks in the housing market, consider subscribing to the channel for future updates. Number 7. Denver, Colorado. I took this investigation west into the Rocky Mountains to examine Denver, a city that attracts newcomers with its peaks, trails, and outdoor lifestyle. What many of them don't realize is that they're arriving in the middle of a historic aridification cycle, one that's quietly reshaping the region. Roughly half of Denver's water supply originates in the Colorado River Basin on the far side of the mountains, and the latest data paints a bleak picture. After reviewing recent reports, it's clear the Colorado River is in serious trouble. This single river supports about 40 million people across 7 states, yet its flow has declined by roughly 20% over the past century, largely driven by climate change. This isn't a temporary dip, it's a long, slow collapse. The river is being stretched beyond its limits, and it's showing. Denver Water is fully aware of the danger and has been scrambling to secure additional water rights, but that effort comes with fierce legal battles and massive costs. What's worse, I found documentation showing that Denver is legally obligated to share water shortages with other users. As the river continues to shrink, the city will face mandatory reductions that could permanently alter everyday life, from lawn watering to basic household use. Then there's the growth factor. Housing data shows the Denver metro area has sprawled outward at an aggressive pace, replacing open prairie with roads, rooftops, and concrete. This rapid development creates urban heat islands that accelerate evaporation and further stress already limited water supplies. Adding to the concern, research published in the journal Science indicates that the mega-drought gripping the Southwest is the most severe in at least 1,200 years. Buying property in a city tied so heavily to a failing river is a serious gamble. The mountain views may be priceless, but the water required for daily life, yes, even flushing a toilet, is only going to become more expensive and more restricted. If you know anyone considering a move to the Rockies, please share this video with them. They deserve to understand the risks before making that leap. Number 6. Salt Lake City, Utah. This is the point where the story shifts from merely alarming to genuinely dangerous. Salt Lake City isn't just dealing with a water shortage, it's staring down a threat that could make large parts of the region impossible to live in. The situation here goes beyond inconvenience and moves straight into existential territory. Over the past few decades, the Great Salt Lake has lost roughly two-thirds of its size, shrinking dramatically since the 1980s. When I examined recent NASA satellite images, the speed at which the shoreline is retreating was hard to ignore. But the real danger isn't the loss of scenery or recreation. The true problem lies in what's been left behind at the bottom of the lake. That exposed lakebed is packed with arsenic, mercury, and other heavy metals that have built up over hundreds of years. As the water evaporates, those toxins don't disappear. They dry into a fine, powdery dust. I came across warnings from local atmospheric scientists explaining that strong winds can lift this contaminated dust into the air and carry it straight into the lungs of millions of people across the Salt Lake Valley. This isn't a hypothetical risk. Experts compare the potential fallout to what happened at Owens Lake in California, except on a far larger and more dangerous scale. To make matters worse, a report from Brigham Young University suggests that without immediate and aggressive water conservation, the Great Salt Lake could effectively vanish within the next 5 years. If the water disappears and the air itself becomes hazardous, home values won't simply decline, they'll crater. After all, who would willingly buy property in a place where something as basic as breathing could make you sick? If this surprises you, let me know in the comments whether you would personally take the risk of living here. Number 5. Fresno, California. I took this investigation straight into the center of California's agricultural engine to examine Fresno, and what I found there was deeply unsettling. This region has become ground zero for one of the most extreme geological failures unfolding in real time. As drought has made surface water from the Sierra Nevada increasingly unreliable, both farmers and cities have turned to groundwater as a last resort, pumping it out at an unsustainable pace just to stay afloat. Data from the California Department of Water Resources shows the consequences clearly. Aquifers beneath Fresno are being depleted so aggressively that the land above them is collapsing. This phenomenon, known as subsidence, is occurring here faster than in almost any other place on the planet. In certain areas of the San Joaquin Valley near Fresno, the ground has dropped more than 28 feet over the past 100 years. That kind of land collapse doesn't just show up on charts. It tears apart real-world infrastructure. I came across images of cracked bridges, warped canals, and well casings sticking out of the earth after the surrounding ground gave way. Even more troubling, subsidence permanently damages the aquifer itself. Once the underground layers are compressed, they lose the ability to store water in the future. It's like crushing an empty soda can. You can't refill it to its original capacity no matter how hard you try. Now, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is forcing major reductions in pumping, and that means thousands of acres of farmland are likely to be taken out of production. As the agricultural economy withers, the housing market in Fresno, which depends heavily on that economic base, faces a bleak outlook. What's happening here isn't just environmental or financial, it's both at once, a physical collapse unfolding alongside an economic one. If you want to stay informed about which housing markets may actually be safe, consider subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. Number 4. Albuquerque, New Mexico. My investigation next took me into the high desert of Albuquerque, a city that's undeniably beautiful but quietly running on borrowed time. For decades, Albuquerque's growth was built on the belief that a massive underground aquifer lay beneath it, one so large it was once compared to Lake Superior. That assumption became the cornerstone of development and long-term planning across the region. Then, in the 1990s, the United States Geological Survey delivered a stunning reality check. Their research revealed that the aquifer was far smaller and far more fragmented than anyone had believed. For years, the city had been operating on wildly inflated estimates of its water supply, and by the time the truth emerged, irreversible damage had already been done. To Albuquerque's credit, the city responded aggressively. Conservation efforts slashed per-person water use and became a national model for efficiency. But when I dug deeper, I found that the city is now leaning heavily on the San Juan Chama project, which diverts water from the Colorado River basin. And as we've already seen, The Colorado River itself is in serious decline. Adding another layer of risk, a study from Los Alamos National Laboratory warns that rising temperatures across New Mexico will accelerate evaporation while reducing snowpack, the very source needed to recharge both rivers and aquifers. That leaves Albuquerque trapped between two failing lifelines, a depleted groundwater reserve below and a shrinking river system upstream. I also reviewed recent housing market trends. While home prices have climbed, the long-term question of whether there will be enough water to support a growing population remains deeply uncertain. Buying property here means investing in a desert environment that's becoming hotter, drier, and more strained every year. If you believe developers should be required to clearly disclose water risks to buyers, tap the like button and make your voice heard. Number 3. Los Angeles, California. Next, we arrive in Los Angeles, the second largest city in the United States and a place many people assume can simply spend its way out of any problem. But the deeper I looked, the clearer it became that money alone can't solve what's coming. Los Angeles was never built on local water. It was built on imported water, and that foundation is starting to crack. I followed the three major lifelines that keep this city functioning: the Los Angeles Aqueduct carrying water from the Owens Valley, the Colorado River Aqueduct, and the State Water Project that pulls supplies from Northern California. The alarming reality is that all three of these systems are under strain at the exact same time. This isn't a single failure. It's a convergence of crises that no amount of new pipes or pumps can magically fix. Internal documents and public records show that environmental protections are already reducing how much water can be sent south from Northern California in order to safeguard endangered fish species. Meanwhile, the Owens Valley has been pushed to the brink, left dry after decades of extraction, triggering toxic dust storms and endless legal battles. And the Colorado River, which we've already covered, has officially entered a Tier 2 shortage, signaling deeper cuts ahead. The warning signs are no longer abstract. The Metropolitan Water District of Southern California recently declared a formal water shortage emergency, forcing millions of residents to restrict outdoor watering to just 1 day per week. History tells us something uncomfortable here. Civilizations that cannot reliably supply themselves with water do not endure indefinitely. Los Angeles real estate already sits at some of the highest price points in the nation, which means the financial exposure is enormous. If water rationing becomes a permanent part of life, the premium attached to owning a home in this city could disappear faster than most people expect. Please share this video with anyone you know in California. These are facts they need to see before it's too late. Number 2. Las Vegas, Nevada. I headed deep into the Mojave Desert to examine Las Vegas, a city that may represent the boldest bet humans have ever made against nature. From the outside, it looks unstoppable, but its survival hinges on a single, fragile water source. About 90% of Las Vegas's water supply comes from Lake Mead, the enormous reservoir formed by the Hoover Dam, and that dependency is becoming increasingly dangerous. When I reviewed the most recent water level data for Lake Mead, the situation was frankly alarming. The lake has fallen to record lows, dropping so far that intake pipes once safely submerged are now visible above the waterline. In response, the Southern Nevada Water Authority was forced to spend nearly $1.5 billion constructing a third intake, known as the third straw, positioned at the very bottom of the reservoir. That project exists for one reason only: to keep water flowing if the lake drops even further. This is what survival mode looks like. To be fair, Las Vegas has become a global leader in water recycling, returning nearly all indoor water use back into the system. But even the most advanced conservation technology has limits. The city has no control over massive evaporation losses from Lake Mead, nor can it stop water reductions coming from upstream states. If the lake ever reaches dead pool status, where water can no longer pass through Hoover Dam, Las Vegas would be cut off entirely, functioning like an island with no remaining lifeline. The warning signs are already escalating. New regulations have begun banning ornamental grass, signaling that much stricter measures are likely ahead. And it's important to remember that the federal government holds the authority to sharply reduce Nevada's water allocation if shortages deepen. Now imagine trying to sell a home in a city whose primary water source has been reduced to a shrinking mudflat. If this perspective gave you something new to think about, drop a comment below. I'd like to hear your take. Number 1. Phoenix, Arizona. At the top of the list, the most critical flashpoint in the American water crisis, we arrive in Phoenix, Arizona. This is the clearest warning sign yet. Phoenix has been one of the fastest growing housing markets in the country, even as it sits in a desert that shatters heat records year after year. That contradiction alone should raise alarms, but what I uncovered goes far beyond intuition. During this investigation, I came across a major announcement from the Arizona Department of Water Resources that should have sent shockwaves through the real estate market. Somehow, it barely made a ripple. The state formally concluded that groundwater supplies in the Phoenix region are not sufficient to support projected demand over the next 100 years. As a direct result, officials have stopped issuing assured water supply certificates for new housing developments on the city's outer edges. That single decision effectively puts the brakes on large-scale suburban expansion around Phoenix. When I dug into the report itself, the numbers were staggering. It identified a projected shortfall of nearly 5 million acre-feet of water. Developers are now scrambling to find legal and regulatory workarounds, but no loophole can override basic geology. The era of endless sprawl that once made Phoenix housing cheap, plentiful, and appealing is coming to an abrupt end. If you purchase a home on the outskirts of Phoenix today, there's a real possibility that within a decade you could be dependent on trucked-in water or a well that's slowly running dry. Temperatures are climbing, water reserves are shrinking, and the housing market is charging ahead as if none of this matters. That combination is dangerous. What I've laid out here isn't a random collection of scary statistics. It's a roadmap pointing toward future financial fallout. These 10 cities are colliding with hard geological and climate realities that no amount of glossy marketing can fix. Whether you're an investor or a homeowner, you have to look past the granite countertops and designer finishes and pay attention to the pipes behind the walls. When the water stops flowing, property value doesn't decline. It vanishes. I'll continue tracking these trends and updating you as conditions change. If you want to protect your investments and stay ahead of what's coming, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment letting me know which city you think will hit the wall first. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next investigation.